whether former President Trump's actions on January 6th are grounds to keep him off the 2024 ballot. The lawsuit argues that Trump is not eligible to appear on the state's presidential ballot under the 14th Amendment's insurrection clause, which bars anyone who swore under oath to defend the presidential ballot, unquote, engaged in insurrection or rebellion from holding office. The first day of testimony yesterday saw several police officers take the stand to recount their experiences on January 6th. Congressman Eric Swalwell also testified remotely about what lawmakers experienced that day. Colorado is not the only state testing the Civil War-era legal theory. NBC News reports that arguments before the Minnesota Supreme Court in a lawsuit to boot him off the ballot in that state, which also cites the little-known provision in the 14th Amendment, are set to begin Thursday. Similar legal challenges are underway in New Hampshire, Arizona, and Michigan. Trump's legal team originally tried to have the Colorado suit thrown out, but his campaign is now fundraising off it. Joining us now, NBC News senior national politics reporter Jonathan Allen. Great to see you, John. So let's just talk about this lawsuit, not the legality of it per se, but the political ramifications. I know there are some Democrats who have expressed wariness to me that this idea is playing right into Trump's hands, that this is a sort of little-known provision. It's unclear if it's even legal. Trying to keep him off the ballot sort of reinforces the idea that this whole thing, including his legal cases, are all just a deep state conspiracy to defeat him. What's your take?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's certainly Democrats that believe that. There's some split within the party, but I think for most Democrats, they'd like to be able to beat Donald Trump at the ballot box in 2024. So setting aside just for a second, that sort of that question of the politics of it and whether it helps Trump. He's fundraising, as you point out, ever since he started being indicted, since these lawsuits about the 14th Amendment started coming up. He's been taking off within the Republican primary. Just setting that aside for a moment, there are also a lot of Democrats who believe that unless he was actually convicted of engaging in a rebellion or an insurrection, that 14th Amendment clause should not be triggered.
So let's talk about the 2024 landscape, John. Vice President Pence bowed out this weekend. Campaign had financial issues. It's not stunning, perhaps, that he had to make this decision, though people didn't expect it in Las Vegas. But just talk to us about his path, about someone who so loyally served Donald Trump right until the end, until January 6th. He broke with Trump then. He defended the Constitution. And since then, he's made his campaign about explaining why he did so. But what a fall from grace that someone who was the vice president of the United States didn't even get close to making it to Iowa.
Yeah, it made him a pariah within the Republican Party to certify the election results of 2020 while Donald Trump was railing against them. And there's obviously a small segment of the Republican Party. When I say a small segment, I mean an infinitesimal segment of the Republican Party that looked at what Mike Pence did and said, not only did he do the right thing, but that's my guy. That's who I want in there. With all these choices between Donald Trump, who actually fomented outrage about the 2020 election, attempted to overturn the 2020 election, stood, in Washington, D.C. and told people to march to the Capitol. Between him and then the set of Republicans who are on some spectrum between that and actually thinking the 2020 election was decided fairly, Mike Pence ends up not even having the money or the support to get to Iowa.
And speaking of Iowa, we had a new Des Moines Register poll out yesterday. Some buzz about Nikki Haley catching Ron DeSantis. She's now tied for second in a state that DeSantis had placed all his chips on. But to react to that, if you will, but also tell us, what I think is the real takeaway here is that Trump is in a state that he's never been particularly popular, has a 30-plus point lead, and also that he's the second choice candidate for so many of the others. So let's say if DeSantis were to drop out, most of his supporters wouldn't go to Haley, but to Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's about 40% of the DeSantis supporters end up going to Trump if DeSantis were to drop out, which is, by the way, the argument that DeSantis people have been making. They're basically saying, look, if DeSantis drops out, Trump wins. If Haley drops out, a much lower percentage of hers, I think it's 12%, would go to Trump. Most of them would go to DeSantis. So that's a big argument for DeSantis in terms of trying to say that he should be the nominee. Of course, the thing that's working against him is that his trajectory has been nothing but downward since he got in, where you've seen Haley build slowly over time, and a very upward, if slow, trajectory from being, virtually unsupported to being in a place where she's tied for second in Iowa. You see her having moved in New Hampshire, and obviously South Carolina, her home state, is a place where she would be expected to do well.
And then, John, we're about a week away from the next Republican debate. Trump, of course, skipping it again. Tell us who you think. Give us a candidate or two who you believe it's a make or break moment.
I think it's a make or break moment for Ron DeSantis right now, John. I mean, he has been losing altitude, not just in polling, but also in terms of donors, some who have stopped giving to him, some who have started giving back to Donald Trump, as NBC has recently reported. I'm not saying he needs to have a breakout moment, but now you're going to see him match more closely against Nikki Haley. I expect to see the two of them go after each other a little bit. They're just they're jockeying for that position. And if DeSantis doesn't come off better than Haley for a third straight debate, you could see him start to lose even more support.
Yeah, and this one happening in his home state of Florida.